Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Military Tutorials. Today's going to be a build guide for the Dwemer Scholar. Now this is quite unlike any build guide I've done before and it's actually quite unique. You may have seen other Dwemer themed builds on YouTube, but this one is purely centered around role playing and immersiveness, or if that's a word. So it's going to be centered mostly around having a high resistance to damage and magic, of course, and at the same time doing a relatively large damage output, but I wouldn't recommend playing on any difficulty above Master, as I find Legendary is a bit too difficult considering that we're not going to be using the most effective weapons and armour for this build. Now the skills are going to be Restoration, One-Handed, Archery, Heavy Armour, Smithing and Enchanting. Now that's 7 skills, but I feel that ordinarily you shouldn't have more than 6 really, but in this particular case we won't be spending many perks in Smithy or Enchant, or rather Restoration anyway, so it doesn't really matter about that. Anyway, let's go on to the backstory, which has been shortened to give you more versatility when designing your own backstory, and then we can get on to the battle tactics, skills and perk investment. The Dwemer Scholar is a Breton. He was born into a wealthy family in High Rock, and had always had an obsession with the Dwemer and their architecture and machinery. Unfortunately though, having lived in High Rock, he never got to experience Dwemer architecture or explore Dwemer ruins firsthand. After reading the book, The Ethereum Wars, he decided to journey to Skyrim in order to learn more about this material, and the Dwemer as a whole. You'll want to do all the Dwemer related quests and obtain the Dwarven Spider or Dwarven Swift Follower, as well as the Ethereum Staff. I've already released a guide on where to obtain these followers. Now that we've got the backstory out of the way, let's talk about perk investment, skills and playstyle. In case you haven't noticed yet, this build is primarily a tank. It's all about absorbing as much damage as possible, while doing as much damage as possible with immersive weapons. As such, it's advisable not to play on Legendary difficulty, although Master is more than suitable. The weapons for this build are going to be a one-handed sword, a crossbow, specifically an enhanced Dwarven crossbow, and Spellbreaker. Spellbreaker is a unique shield, a Daedric artifact of Perii, which you'll receive after the completion of the quest The Only Cure, in which you'll have to kill the monk or Kendor in the city of Bethardums, which is an abandoned Dwemer ruin. Once you've obtained this artifact, it will allow you to negate any incoming spell damage up to 50 points, but it effectively makes you invincible from one angle, as it takes 2 seconds to put the shield back up, and you're effectively invulnerable for 3 seconds after it goes down. Just make sure that you're not surrounded by magic casters. The playstyle I found most effective is to allow your follower or dwarven followers to engage the enemy in melee whilst you fire at them from behind with a crossbow. Once your enemies are down to low health, then you can charge in with your sword and Spellbreaker or other shield in order to do maximum damage. Just beware of your stamina bar though, as once it's depleted you'll find that you're much less effective, as you won't be able to bash or power attack. Stamina is absolutely essential to this build, which is why I recommend investing 70% health and 30% stamina from level 1 to 21. After level 21 you'll want to invest 40% magicka, 50% health and 10% stamina, all the way up to level 51. Now that we've got the basic playstyle out of the way, I'd like to talk about skills and perk investment. As I've already mentioned, the skills for this build are going to be Restoration, One-Handed, Heavy Armour, Archery, Smithing and Enchanting. Now this may sound like a lot, but you won't be investing many skill points into Smithing or Restoration at all. Smithing, you'll only need to get Steel Armour, Dwarven Smithing and Arcane Enchanter. That way you'll be able to smith Dwarven weapons and armour and improve them twice as much, not to mention the fact that you'll also be able to upgrade enchanted weapons and armour, which will be very useful considering the amount of enchanting that will be involved in this particular build. The next skill is One-Handed. You want to take all 5 ranks of the Armman perk and Savage Strike for that nice decapitation kill move chance. Then Archery, you want to take all 5 ranks of Overdraw. Then Eagle Eye, 1 rank of Steady Hand or 2 depending on your preference, but if you take 2 you'll have to get to level 51 rather than level 50. Then after that you'll have to go to Power Shot and Quick Shot, and then perhaps if you like you can go up to Bullseye, although I didn't choose it for this build as I find that it really messes up your aim. Now after that, Heavy Armour. From the Heavy Armour skill tree you're going to want to take all 5 ranks of Juggernaut plus Well Fitted. You're not going to need Fists of Steel, Cushioned or anything else, as this build is purely about absorbing as much damage as possible whilst doing as much as possible with immersive weapons, as I've already said. For restoration, you're going to need Novice, Apprentice, Adept restoration, and you're going to need Regeneration and Respite. That way, you'll be able to cast all the healing spells up to close wounds, and maybe wards if you find that Spellbreaker just isn't enough, although it almost certainly will be. Regeneration will allow you to restore 50% more health, and Respite will allow you to restore stamina with your healing spells, which is absolutely essential considering how much you'll be restoring, and how much you'll need restoring once you finish your power bashes and power attacks in battle. Now onto block. You'll need to take absolutely everything from the block tree, except for all ranks of shield wall, where you can just take 3 out of 5. That should be more than enough to avoid most damage from incoming melee attacks and arrows. Just make sure you're blocking during most battles, except for when you're healing or attacking. As I've said before, stamina is absolutely essential to this build, so you need to make sure that you have enough stamina to perform power bashes, and of course power attacks. In order to do this, you can enchant your weapon with absorb stamina, although I decided to enchant it with fire damage instead for more immersive experience, and also because absorb stamina is quite an overpowered enchantment, as it allows you practically infinite stamina whilst in combat. The Atronach stone is going to be used for this build, as it allows you 50% magical absorption, which will go very well with your power dragon skin, which also allows you 50% magical absorption for 60 seconds once a day. I recommend not using this too often though, as it can really break the game, especially considering you're already using Spellbreaker. This will make you invulnerable to magic, and it will completely restore your magicka very fast. This will be very useful for your restoration, not to mention the 50 bonus points of magicka, although it will reduce your overall magicka regeneration speed by 50%, but I found this isn't too much of a handicap, considering that we won't be using too much restoration anyway, except for in the very worst situations. Now that we've got most of that out of the way, I'd just like to close with some statements about the gameplay. During combat, you'll need to make sure that you're blocking most of the time in order to avoid most damage, otherwise you'll find that you die very quickly at low levels. At high levels, you can afford not to block so often, but make sure that when you do stop blocking, you're attacking or healing, otherwise there's absolutely no point. Before you get Spellbreaker, just enchant a Dwarven Sword, or Dwarven Shield rather, with Resist Magic. This goes very well with your standard Resist Magic attribute. As I mentioned earlier, in regards to roleplaying, you're going to want to do absolutely everything you can in regard to the Dwemer. Therefore, you want to collect as many Dwemer artifacts as you can and hoard them in your home. I recommend having a home Vindrel Hall from Markov, as it's of a Dwarven style and really helps to complement the role-playing aspect of this build. You'll also want to complete any quests related to the Dwemer, such as locating Grimsever in the Singeleft from Yule the Lioness and Riften. You may also want to complete Lost to the Ages, although actually come to think of it, you'll need to complete Lost to the Ages anyway in order to acquire the Ethereal Staff. Although you may want to acquire a different Ethereal artifact, and of course it's your build so you can choose. I just consider the Ethereal Staff more practical for this build than any of the others, particularly the Ethereal Crown. You'll need to complete the quest The Only Cure in order to get Spellbreaker anyway, but this is a very good quest for roleplaying, so I recommend you complete it regardless of which shield you'd like to use for your endgame build. A lot of time, work and effort went into this build, so I really appreciate your support. If you like the build, then please like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and have a nice day.